champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, back with another 2022 college football non-conference preview. Texas and Alabama up now. We're doing the thumbs up challenge today. I do this a couple of times a year. If a video hits a certain number of thumbs up, I make another video. So what have I done today? I did Florida and Utah earlier today. Then I did Arkansas and Cincinnati. And on the Arkansas-Cincinnati video, I think we were going for 400 thumbs up. It just hit 400, so here I am with another video. This time, it's going to be 450 this time. We can do 450. 450 thumbs up on this video, and I'll do another one. The most requested game you wanted to hear me talk about on that last video was Texas versus Alabama, so that's what we're going to do today. I mentioned when I did an Ohio State versus Notre Dame preview, I think, was it yesterday or the day before, and I mentioned in that video, hard to find two bigger brands in all of college football, right, than Ohio State and Notre Dame. Well, we found it. Texas and Alabama. These are two of the biggest brands worldwide in all of college football. Now, I know Texas has been down lately, and it would be fun to make a video just laughing about that, and I can do that if you want me to. But, you know, look, Texas... Throughout the history of college football, Texas is one of the biggest brands, and that's also the case for Alabama. Alabama's on the opposite end of the spectrum right now as Texas. They're sort of been on top of the college football world for the last decade or so. Not currently on top, though. Nope, that honor belongs to my Georgia Bulldogs, who just got done humiliating Alabama in the national championship game about 6 weeks ago, 5-6 weeks ago. I'm still on cloud nine. Can't tell me anything. Texas versus Alabama. Now, this is a week 2 game, which I'm glad about, to be honest. There are a lot of really good week 1 games, and that's always the case. Not always the case in week 2, so I'm okay with this game being in week 2, because you're going to have a lot of bad games in week 2, let's just be real. All these teams that are playing good games in week 1, most of them are playing bad games in week 2, so this will give us a great game to watch in week 2. I'm sure it'll be a primetime night game. Texas versus Alabama at Texas. This is a home-and-home series. So, again, shout out to Texas and Alabama for scheduling a home-and-home. Uncle Lou hates neutral site games. I can't stand them. I'm okay with the national championship being at a neutral site. I guess I'm okay with the playoffs being neutral as long as we're sticking with a 4-team playoff, but as soon as the playoffs expand, no more playoff games. Playoff games then need to be on campuses too. So shout out to Texas and Oklahoma for scheduling a home-and-home. Georgia's playing Oregon, neutral site. I hate these neutral site games. College football, every time I say this, people act like I'm speaking Chinese. I just have this weird idea that college football games should be played, on college campuses. So shout out to Texas and Alabama for scheduling a home-and-home. This year, 2022, in Austin, Texas. Next year, 2023, in Tuscaloosa. But let's talk about Texas versus Alabama. Only played 9 times? That surprised me. I thought, as good as Texas and Alabama have been in a lot of years, I would have thought maybe they'd played in more than 9 bowl games. But that's not the case. They haven't. What's even more surprising? Now, if you're a Texas fan, I'm sure you're aware of this. But what's even more surprising to me, they've played 9 times. Texas has only lost to Alabama once. And 1 tie. So Texas is 7-1-1 all time against Alabama. Now, I didn't look this up, but I'm pretty sure there's not another team in America that has played Alabama 9 or more times that has a higher winning percentage against Alabama than Texas does. That's impressive, 7-1-1. The only win Alabama has against Texas all time was the last time they played at the end of the 2009 season in the BCS championship game, a game that Alabama won. And what do we remember about that game, the BCS championship game from 2009? What do I remember from that game? Oh, I know. Texas starting quarterback went down in that game early, and Texas had to play the entire game with a backup quarterback. Question to the Alabama fans. Does that mean that your win against Texas somehow didn't count? I don't know. Alabama, of course, lost a wide receiver in this year's national championship game. And according to Alabama fans, the game doesn't really count because that's the only reason they lost. So I guess Alabama didn't really win that 2009 BCS championship game since Texas quarterback went down. I don't know. I'll have to Google it and see. Hold on a second. Yep, I just Googled it, and yep, Texas did win the 2009 BCS championship, so I guess Georgia is still your 2021 champs. Anyway, let's talk about this game and stop trolling, at least attempt to, for a minute or two. Texas has been terrible, really, since that 2009 BCS championship game. A couple of good years sprinkled in here and there, but nothing like the run they were on in the 2000s, right? You had the Vince Young years in the mid-2000s. Colt McCoy, I think, was the quarterback 2009, 2010, that title game against Alabama where he went down in the end. Things have not gone well for Texas since then. It's been a revolving door in terms of the head coach. Currently, Steve Sarkisian filling that role, a former Nick Saban assistant. Can Steve Sarkisian become not the first, not the second, but the third former Saban assistant to knock off the Crimson Tide? That's what they're going to try to do week 2. Home game for Texas against Alabama. Alabama is returning a lot. Of course, Bryce Young at the quarterback position and Will Anderson at outside linebacker. Maybe the two best players in all of college football heading into next season. I mean, it's not crazy to think that Bryce Young could be the best offensive player, right? I mean, he won the Heisman last year. A lot of people already think Will Anderson was the best defensive player last year. He was definitely top 5, and he's going to be on the top of everyone's list for, best defensive player heading into this next season. And, of course, Bryce Young will be the favorite. Him and C.J. Stroud, I guess, quarterback Ohio State, to win the Heisman going into next season. So it's possible Alabama winds up with the best player on offense in all of football, Bryce Young, and the best player on defense in all of football, Will Anderson. Where does Texas have any advantage in this game at all over Alabama? Well, it's a home game. That's an advantage. All-time record. I mean, they've owned Alabama throughout history. I'm not sure that has much, if anything at all, to do with the game, other than something that Texas fans can brag about all offseason and point out that, hey, we're 7-1-1 against you all time. I really don't think that's going to have much impact on this game. Texas does have the best running back participating in this game, Bijan Robinson. He's really, really good. Might be the best running back in all of college football. So there's going to be some talent on the field. Texas has got some decisions to make and some questions to answer at the quarterback position. Whether they bring in Quinn Ewers or whatever his name is, the guy was at Ohio State, collected his $1 million in the NIL to hit the transfer market back to Texas. Texas got to play better defensively too. Steve Sarkisian, I'm not sold on him. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not sold on him. The talent's never really been an issue at Texas, no matter who the head coach has been. Even the head coaches that have really, really struggled have managed to recruit pretty well. I mean, they're in the state of Texas. They're always going to have pretty decent recruiting classes. Unfortunately, those recruiting classes haven't translated to wins on the field. Texas has really been struggling lately. Hard to see a scenario where Texas wins this game, to be honest. This isn't a trash-talking video or whatever. Alabama's going to be a significant favorite here. And go back and look at Alabama's Week 1 games under Nick Saban, and there's been some, there's been some good ones. They played Miami. I believe they played. I know they played Wisconsin one year. Anyway, on and on and on and on and on. Most of these games end up being blowouts. I mean, basically, you're giving Nick Saban 8 months to prepare for a game against Texas, who's head coached by a guy he knows pretty well in Steve Sarkisian. It really doesn't look good for Texas heading into this game week 1. Now, of course, once they line it up, anything can happen, and I'm not going to come on here and say that Texas has a 0% chance of winning this game. But I don't know what anybody saw from Texas last year to make them think they're going to win. I don't know what anybody sees heading into this coming year that makes them think they're going to win. It looks like an uphill battle for the Longhorns in this game here. But like I said, there will be a lot of eyeballs on this game just because of the two teams involved. I mean, no matter how bad Texas is, like I said, they're a blue blood program. They're one of the most recognizable brands in all of college football across the country and really across the world. And whether they're on top of the college football world or whether they're struggling, a lot of eyeballs always on Texas football. Same can be said for Alabama, especially in the last 12 or 13 years under Nick Saban. There will be a ton of people watching this game, and it's in week 2, a week where you don't have a ton of marquee matchups like you do in week one. Question marks for Alabama. The ground game. Last year, 2021, the worst rushing team Alabama has put on the field since Nick Saban got there. Not that they were terrible or couldn't run the ball at all, but clearly they were not the running team that they had been in years past. There's no Derrick Henry on that team. There was no Mark Ingram on that team. The running back situation was iffy. They brought a transfer in from Georgia Tech, Jahmyr Gibbs, and I like Jahmyr Gibbs. You know, he's from the state of Georgia, and even though he went to Georgia Tech, I don't hate somebody just because they, go to Georgia Tech or go to any other school. I like Jahmyr Gibbs, and he'll definitely be a much more productive back at Alabama than he was at Georgia Tech, given the talent that's going to be surrounding him there, right? He'll have a much better offensive line, clearly, a much better passing game, which always helps the running game. And that brings me to the wide receiver position, talking about Alabama and the passing game. Clearly, Bryce Young is a pretty good QB, especially when he's got 2,000-yard receivers to throw the ball to like he had last year in Mechie and Jamison Williams. Now, with those two guys out, Bryce Young looked pretty average, honestly, in that game against Georgia in the national title game. So with a whole offseason to get these other wide receivers prepped and ready to go, I do think Alabama's receivers will be better in 2022 than what we saw at the end of the 2021 season. I don't think anybody doubts that at all. I mean, they recruit like mad every single year. They're loaded with NFL players at every single class, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. I mean, just go on down the list. Alabama's finished number one in recruiting something like 10 of the last 12 years. I mean, if I have to make a video explaining how well Alabama has done at recruiting, then you're not much a college football fan if you need to watch a video that explains that to you. I mean, I think that's just something everyone already knows. Again, Texas is a team that's recruited really, really well, too. A lot of top 10 classes over the last several years. Probably the first or second most talented team in the Big 12 every single year the last 10 years. They were Oklahoma. Both recruit really, really well. The recruiting has not been the issue for Texas. Like I mentioned, it's been the results on the field. Some head-scratching losses for Texas almost every single year for the last decade. Unfortunately for Texas, or maybe fortunately for Texas, I don't think this week one game against Alabama is really going to be an indication of what Texas is going to be this coming year. I mean, let's be honest. Texas could lose this game by 3 scores and go 11-1, don't you think? I mean, look around the Big 12. Texas has to get through the Alabama hurdle week one, which probably isn't happening. But after that, who else are they really playing? Oklahoma, well, brand new coaching staff. Brent Venables never been a head coach before. Almost all the offensive talent left that team when Lincoln Riley left for Southern Cal. Both their quarterbacks from last year left. One of their best wide receivers, Hasselwood, transferred to Arkansas. They've never been very good defensively under Lincoln Riley the last however many years he's been there. And I know Lincoln Riley's not there and Brent Venables is, and he's a much better defensive coach, but you can't turn an entire defensive roster over in one offseason. Now, I do think Oklahoma's defense is going to be better, but, so okay, Oklahoma. Who else is in the Big 12? West Virginia, toilet bowl. Baylor, and who played for the Big 12 title game this last year? Baylor and Oklahoma State. Well, they both lose some key pieces. And to me, watching Baylor and Oklahoma State play in the Big 12 title game was kind of like watching Pitt and Wake Forest play in the ACC title game. It was worth watching. It was interesting because it was two teams that aren't normally involved in the conference title game. But for a team like Pitt or Wake Forest to make it to the ACC title game, Miami, Florida State, and Clemson have got to be down, all down at the same time, right? Well, it's the same sort of thing in the Big 12 when you wake up the first Saturday in December and flip your TV on and you're watching Baylor and Oklahoma State playing the Big 12 title game. What does that mean? Well, it means it was a down year for Oklahoma and Texas. So it's hard to imagine the schools like that putting together 2 really good seasons in a row. Like, would you put your money right now on having a Big 12 title game next year that featured Baylor and Oklahoma State again? No, probably not. So point is, Texas could lose week 1 to Alabama. Not even just lose, get blown out. That's not necessarily an indication that they're then going to go 6-6 or something like that, right? Alabama is going to clearly be the best team on their schedule, by far. Better than Oklahoma, better than Baylor, TCU, Kansas, Kansas State, West Virginia. I mean, you name it. Texas Tech. Alabama's clearly the best team on Texas' schedule next year. So, you figure out the QB situation in the offseason. You go out, you see how he does week 1 against Alabama, and then you sort of just forget that game even happened, in my opinion, if you're a Texas fan, and you move on to the rest of your season, and you set a goal of going 11-0 after the Alabama game. I'm not suggesting Texas can go 11-1 overall. I'm just saying losing or getting blown out by Alabama week 1 doesn't automatically mean they're going 6-6 next year because, oh my God, they got blown out by Alabama, to go 6-6. No, Alabama would blow out a lot of 9, 10, and 11 win teams, a lot of them. So it is what it is. I don't think Texas should tuck tail and run, bury their head in the sand if they get blown out week 1. I don't know why I keep saying that. Look, I'm trying to make these videos fair and leaving the trash talk sort of aside, but let's just be honest. Texas is going to get humiliated in this game. You ain't got no chance. I mean, look, you ended up on this table last year for a reason. Here you are down here, the horns down. And I'm keeping the horns down on that Texas helmet, by the way, until they beat Kansas. Can you beat Kansas? I'm really not trying to turn this into a trash talk video. I'm really not. Anyway, Alabama versus Texas. Big non-con game. You'll all be watching it. You know you will. Nick Saban versus Steve Sarkisian. Nick Saban lost to two former assistants last year. My God, that's poverty. That's poverty. I remember back in the day when Nick Saban used to beat his former assistants. Boy, that seems like a million years ago now. Can he beat his former assistant Sarkisian? Or will Sarkisian become the third former Saban assistant to defeat him? I don't know. You know who doesn't have any losses to former assistants on their staff? Not a single one? Kirby Smart.